So I went and actually at that point I had enough in my first one. And it had appreciated, and I'd done some extra work on it to improve the value. So everybody will love this, right? This is how, because everybody's like, oh, how do you go from 1 to 2, right? Because a lot of people just buy 1. Not a whole lot of people go past that. So I bought or they end up selling it because they're like, I'm tired of being a landlord, right? But me, I'm like, let's go to a second one. And what I did is I went and refinanced my first one, and I was able to $50,000. And with that $50,000, I went and bought the second one.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. Hey, it's early December. We're still in the first week. I can't believe the year is almost gone, but our commitment to bringing you interesting people with interesting ways to make money, to hold on to your money, that will go through till I stop doing the show. Right now, I've got interesting person on. He went from being in the oil field to real estate, and I always thought people in the oil industry didn't so much do that. But his name is Casey Gregerson, and Casey, it's great to have you on. You know, you are a petroleum engineer, highly paid profession, challenging, mentally stimulating, and you wound up in real estate.
That's right. Just the way I drew it up back in college, right? Those engineering classes, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. Yeah, I mean, initially, I remember too, like my undergrad, I had a degree, and so I played college football actually, and I was there for 5 years. So unlike all my other buddies, and I went like, if I'm going to be here for 5 years, I'm going to get as much done as I can. So I actually had a major in math and chemistry and minors physics and Spanish. But after all that, I was like, well, what am I actually going to do with that? So luckily I got a degree I got accepted to the University of Wyoming to do my master's in petroleum engineering. So at that point I'm like, all right, now I got a path, and thought I was going to work oil and gas for the rest of my life.
Pretty cool. So, and obviously when you work in O&G, unless you're running the company, you're an employee, right? So they tell you where to go, they tell you what to do. So what got you into real estate? I mean, I know the opportunity arose. You mentioned something about your dad helping you out, but what was the really driving force? Because basically you had it made career-wise. I mean, yeah, it's cyclical in the oil patch, but for the past 20 odd years, petroleum engineers have ruled.
Yeah, it's a little bit of, yeah. So for sure, it's funny how that, and I'll come back to your last point, but as far as like how it started, you sort of hit on it. So one of the best things my dad ever did for me, he was great. I mean, raised me really well, but he helped me with a down payment and co-signed on my house, which was when I was actually going to school at the University of Wyoming in 2010. So I bought that first house and bought actually my roommate's dad who was selling it. So we bought it. And then I did the original house hack, right? Today people talk about house hacking, where people will go and get it, buy a house, and then have pay the rent. So that was initially what I did in 2010. And I just got a taste of it, right? But again, I went and worked, to your point, I had a great job in oil and gas, really well. I had one of the best paying jobs out of college compared to my peers. And I was stoked. I loved it. And oil and gas was good. It's like times in 2012 started was a good time to be in oil and gas. We had company credit cards and third parties. It was fun. I definitely have great memories of it. But kind of when it started to really turn, which is a lot of, right? I'm Canada, right? So I started working in the field originally in West Texas, right? So as an engineer, we spend and I worked for Shell. I should have started there. So I worked for Shell, big company, great training, right? But they send us out to the field for a year. So when I went out to the field of West Texas, I got there and I quickly realized, wow, I had a 2 weeks on shift where I'd work 2 weeks on the field, and then I have 2 home. got all this extra time. So initially that was the first kind of moment that changed. Hey, wow, I got all this time, only work half the year. What's the opportunity I could do? Right. So then, like a lot of other people, I was now moved up to Canada, still working in the field, because I had asked my boss and my mentors, be like, hey, how do I stay in the field? Because I love this schedule and I want to do more. So I'm driving around in the highways up in Alberta, Canada, and somebody recommends the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad to me. So I never forget it. I'm like a lot of people, right? So I'm driving around and never forget, I'm driving site to site and I'm listening to this book, and he starts to talk about assets and liabilities. And then that's when it clicks, right? Like this asset that I've still own. Again, at this point, I've owned this property for the first one. I've owned it for like 5 years, and I've just been making a little bit of cash flow on it. And I'm happy, right? I make a little bit, but it's nothing. And I get some tax write-offs, but it's nothing big. But then I read that book and I'm like, oh, wow, that's what I'm doing, is I have an asset that's paying me, right? So it clicks. And then I go down this rabbit hole of like reading a bunch more books on real estate, learning everything I can. Because then I've got the bug, right? Then I'm like, all right, how do I go get the second one? So I went and actually at that point I had enough in my first one. And it had appreciated, and I'd done some extra work on it to improve the value. So everybody will love this, right? This is how, because everybody's like, oh, how do you go from 1 to 2, right? Because a lot of people just buy one. Not a whole lot of people go past that. So I bought or they end up selling it because they're like, I'm tired of being a landlord, right? But me, I'm like, let's go to a second one. And what I did is I went and refinanced my first one, and I was able to $50,000. And with that $50,000, I went and bought the second one. I won't go too much into detail, but basically with that second one, I bought a house under rented, and I did some value add to it to where when it was all done, once I had fixed it up and had it rented out, I was now making $1,000 a month of cash flow. After I paid my mortgage, taxes, insurance, and everything, I was making $1,000. And at that point, you're like, and I'm only like, I don't know, 25, 26 at the time. I'm like, I just, with no money, literally just from the equity of the first house, just created another $1,000 of cash flow. And then it's on, right? Then you start.
Worse, huh?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Beats work.
Yep. And your point, I was ruined, right? So then I did a couple other business opportunities. We invested in a franchise called Pure Bar, and I started to run my own business. And then I started to apply some of that stuff to real estate. And then like once I started running my own business, I always joke, it was like, I felt almost like schizophrenic or bipolar. I was living two lives, right? Or kind of like those movies, right? To where I would go to Shell. Shell is an extremely conservative, like very structured company, so much red tape to get anything done, right? Just moving at a snail's pace, if you like. Right?
Big company, they got controls, they got systems in place, and you're a cog in the wheel, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And then my other life, I was buying real estate deals, running a small business, and like going as fast as you're just trying to grow and scale. So it's living two different. That's to your point of like, how did you like want to leave the job? Like what eventually made me transition, or what made me, what planted the seed was like being able to run my own thing and have it, like I could have an impact, and such a big impact on my own bottom line when I started to invest and do my own deals versus I could make good money with Shell, but I had a def thing, and I could only push that so hard.
Right. So you're looking back, what would you have done differently knowing what you know now? Would you have bothered going to work for Shell in the first place?
That is a great question. And I've not actually, no one's ever really asked that. Would have started there. I think I would have, because it helped my trajectory so much, because I had a good paying job. And I didn't mention this yet, but what I was able to leverage was, again, I had that 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off schedule. So I have literally 2 weeks to go. I didn't have to do anything for Shell. So what I did is I started finding fixer-uppers, right? Doing work myself, or finding deals, right? So I started doing, or doing property management and training a team, right? I was doing all this time on my off days, right? But I still had that W-2 job. So I always tell this story. I built my rental portfolio from we were around a 1.5 to 2 million in total assets. Total asset value. Obviously, we're using leverage to get there, which I'm going to get to. But anyway, we were able to grow that to like 15 million over like 18 months. And it was purely because of experience and my W-2 income, right? I was speaking, now I could go talk, and I started building relationships with small banks early on. Like on that second deal I'm talking to you about, like I was talking to a small bank, building a relationship. So now I had that W-2 income. So that's why I think I probably would not have changed it, because I was able to granted, I wasn't making near like what I wanted to eventually make, but I had a good stable income and I had flipping experience. And so it was the perfect combination to go to a small bank.
So if you were starting out today, would you be able to do this? Are the opportunities still there?
Yeah, it's a lot. And that's funny too. I talked to mentors of mine. They're like, and then Grant Cardone's got a TV show where they just went and dropped him in the middle of some country, build it again. And I feel like, yeah, just knowing what I now know, I've just spent so many years in masterminds, learning from other people and just training and educating myself. And I'll give you another Rich Dad, Poor Dad quote. Like, I remember he talks about being a door-to-door salesman, right? Like when I first read that book, I'm like, man, I wish I would have done, I don't know anything about sales, right? But now I've had to sell and close deals. Like one of my superpowers in my company is I still am the closer on the like high level deals in our company, and I can come in and negotiate. And it's a skill I didn't realize I had until I really tapped into it. And I definitely wasn't tapping into engineer, which I'm glad. So yeah, I feel like I had to start over. That's the other thing. Thinking back, maybe I should, if I could start it over, trajectory would have been much faster, right? But I took a for kind of longer route to it.
So here's a question. Do you think anybody could replicate your success if they're motivated?
I think so. I mean, I guess the difference with me is I just take action. Like I'll go to, like, I'm a part of a lot of masterminds, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like I go to a 2-day mastermind and I'm learning, getting all these techniques, getting all these best practices from other great people in the industry. And I'm like, let's go apply that. And I come back after the 2 days and I bring it to my team and they'll, Casey, like, and we can't do all of this at once. But I'm like, no, we can. We're going to implement this and that. So I've always taken massive action and been willing to, and I had a great W-2 income that allowed me to take risks over the years to grow. So yeah, maybe not to this point in this scale, but I think anybody absolutely can go out and buy their first rental property or start taking steps to giving financial freedom 100%.
So what's the worst deal you ever made?
The worst deal? Ooh, man. We had a collection of them. I'll never forget this I'm going to go with a combination answer. So we were in Dallas, Fort Worth, and it was around like 2017. And we thought we had it. Like we'd been buying houses and fixing them up and refinancing them. And then when refinanced it, we get our money back and we'd put a tenant in there and we just cash flow, right? It's called the BRRRR strategy, BRRRR, right? So we did that on like 4 houses in Fort Worth, and we're like, man, we got this. And we did it with like 100,000 and just kind of rolled the money. And we're like, all right, now let's go do a bunch of fix and flips to feed our rental portfolio. And then we could do more of these, right? But what we did is we didn't realize is we had a really good contractor and we were investing at lower price points. So when we stepped into the higher price points and started working with different contractors, we struggled, right? And we saw a little bit of seasonality, and we got into some deals where we didn't. And the other thing is we missed on some of our ARVs, granted the markets fluctuated a little bit, but the house didn't end up being worth as much as we thought, right? Instead of this day, like when we underwrite, that's what makes me underwrite so much more conservatively when we're figuring out the exit value of the house, right? So we had like 3 or 4 deals where we did the same thing, and fortunately we sold them all, but we had to take some significant losses to move them, and those are still battle wounds that I carry to today.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, it's a valuable learning experience, right?
Absolutely. Yep. I always joke I didn't get an MBA, but we got it from School of Hard Knocks.
So, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give somebody? I assume in your masterminds, you're mentoring people. What's the biggest 3 takeaways that we could get from you now?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest ones is start early, especially when it comes to real estate, right? Like I've actually, I purchased a house. It's really funny. Last night I was in bed actually with I have 4 boys, right? My first boy though, when he turned 8 or 9, I think it was his 8th birthday, I ended up buying him a house so he could start to buy it and he could learn how to manage it. And ultimately we'd start paying it down over time, right? Because real estate over time it's always going to succeed, right? As long as you look over a long enough horizon, you should be fine. So my second kid was asking about it. So that would be one. It's like start early, right? I bought my first one in college. You could buy one for your kids. Or if you haven't bought a single asset or done anything in real estate, well, you got to start somewhere. And so my first advice would be start now, right? Second thing would be start with somebody who knows what they're doing, unless you're like me and you want to just go figure it out yourself and you want to hustle and you want to work a 2-week job. And then when you're off on your off days, go hustle just as hard. Some people are built like that, but not everyone is. So I always recommend like go find an operator or a partner who is doing deals, right? Because go learn through them versus going through the school of hard knocks, right? Go learn through them and do a deal, right?
Sure.
So yeah, so get started, find a partner, right? And then I think the other thing is just sort of like being, you know what? Here's the other one, and it's that story that I just shared. It's always have 2 exit strategies. So right, so if you're going to go try to fix and flip a house, a lot of people will do that. And fix and flipping can inherently be risky, and it can also be very rewarding, and you can make big profits. But what I've always done is I always make sure, almost on all our deals, I've always got 2 exit strategies. So the first one is to flip it and sell it. Often the second one is, could we keep this property as a rental, right? And this is why I invest in Wyoming and in markets like this or Montana, where I can still buy properties that if I can't flip them, I can hold them. Like right now, it's always a little bit slower. We're talking today in December, right? It's always a little slower in the wintertime in Wyoming. And so what I'm doing is I'm holding some of these properties as rentals because right now, I could either, because here's the other option is if you don't have another exit strategy, the only thing you could do is just drop price, right? And then you're just cutting in your profit and eventually taking losses on a flip, right? So what I do is if you can always buy and hold, if you talk to so many people, they're always, you talk to investors, they're always like, man, I wish I wouldn't have sold all those properties, right? As they look at the value, right? So my thing is have exit strategies and then just being a buy and hold investor, I think is one of the best ways it's a safe way to do it. And you're not going to get rich quick, but you're going to build wealth over a long period of time.
All right, man. Great story here, Casey. Really appreciate you coming on. I guess the best place to find you is CaseyGregerson.com. And the link is in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And we only ask that when you go there, sign up for our free newsletter, like over 60,000 of other FSN community members have. And if you got a question for Casey or myself, shoot me an email, KL@KerryLutz.com. Casey, I love the story. Love to have you back on again when you're available. And we'll talk with you soon.
Love to. Thanks, Kerry. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.